Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan and today's video is going to have spoilers in it from Skeleton Crew, the first episode. Now, in most pirate genre movies and stories, there's going to be a central treasure that all the factions and individuals in the story are going to be going after. Generally, the treasure is a large sum of money, or gold, or perhaps even something more fantastical, like some magical item that grants special powers to the user. What makes Skeleton Crew so unique is, instead of following a group that is seeking the treasure, we're following characters that potentially need to protect the treasure from pirates. And this treasure isn't just an item, but an entire planet, the legendary world of At Attin. So right when Skeleton Crew came out, we did a preliminary video talking about like the dystopian vibes we felt on the planet. Today I want to build on that a little more and try to figure out what exactly is going on in At Attin by delving deeper into some of the dialogue scenes, especially this dialogue scene we see in the classroom. Because if you actually listen closely to what the droids are talking about here, you get a better idea of what exactly they're trying to do on this world, and it's actually kind of related to what's happening in our own world a lot. One of the strangest things about the world of At Attin is the large army of droids that seem to do most of the service and labor jobs on the planet. This might seem normal in most technologically advanced societies, but it's quite strange to see in the Star Wars galaxy. You see, during the Clone Wars, the Confederacy of Independent Systems used a massive droid army to wreak havoc all across the galaxy in a conflict that ended up killing millions. The devastation to the galaxy was so great that it created a very extreme anti-droid sentiment, especially amongst those who lived in the Mid and Outer Rim, where the fighting was the fiercest. The anti-droid sentiment was so strong that not even Emperor Palpatine dared challenge it. The Imperial military actually outlawed the use of battle droids, although they did skirt around their own regulations with so-called security droids like K2SO. Either way, it is extremely abnormal to see a world post-Clone Wars that is completely overrun with droids. And more importantly, on other worlds where you do see droids, they're usually pretty diverse and they look pretty beat up. The droids on At Attin seem very uniform, as if they have an almost planet-wide presence. It's almost as if one single entity or the government is deploying these droids and maintaining them and operating them. That is not very usual. Usually droid ownership in the Star Wars galaxy is at the personal level, especially post Clone Wars. These droids with a giant camera for a head are seen patrolling the schools, but they're also on the streets and in the woods. This gives me a sense that someone is running a surveillance state, and the droids are all employed to keep the population in control and from escaping.
Starships are not permitted to enter or leave.
You could be out past the barrier by now!
Breaching the barrier is a serious violation. The supervisor will not...
You gotta find him! It's not safe out there!
Who is the supervisor? And why are they trying to control the individuals on At Attin? Why are they trying to control what starships can leave and land on this planet? Why is there a barrier, right? We even see kind of a mural of this barrier in Fern's home, which is kind of strange. It's almost religious in a way. It could be that with anti-droid sentiment so high in the wider galaxy that At Attin, with their heavier droid-dependent society, would want to keep itself isolated. And I think what the rulers of At Attin are concerned with is not just the presence of droids everywhere, but the relationship between droids and human beings. And so, what exactly is that relationship? Well, let's take a look at what these droids are teaching these students in this class, because that gives us a lot of insight on what's going on.
By substituting error-prone ledger entries with free-floating variable tables in which a series of matrices are organized by a labeling algorithm.
So this might sound like some gobbledygook, but there's actually purpose to this dialogue. So the droid is pointing out the problem with ledger entries, calling this type of data entry error-prone. Ledger entries are when humans or sentient beings physically enter data into a database. The droid here is arguing that a more complex labeling algorithm is far more efficient and better than looking at individual data sets collected by a human being. Labeling algorithms are used in machine learning. Basically, a teacher or coder will label data so that an algorithm can understand what it's looking at when it's sorting through large amounts of data. This gives parameters for deep machine learning algorithms to find patterns and basically understand what's going on. In theory, with enough data, individual ledger entries and their errors can be negated with large-scale modeling. And so what is this first line about? It's about how machine learning is superior to human analysis. It's about how you can take a large group of data sets and basically apply labels to them and categorize them so that you can better understand them instead of looking at each individual data set as an individual entity. Basically, this is all about turning people into statistics and ignoring the individuality that makes them unique. This is exactly how a AI or more unthinking robot creation would look at society, and this might lead to a more efficient society where resources are allocated much better, but if you are one of those abnormalities, well, things could get really bad for you, right? So let's take a look at the next line.
Contrast this method with the approach practiced in planets outside the barrier called liquidity modeling.
So originally I did a video about this, and I thought they said liquidity bubbling for some reason. I was thinking like acid bubbles. I also hadn't slept because liquidity bubbling isn't exactly a term that's used. What they're actually saying is liquidity modeling, and this is a term that's used. So the Droid teacher is basically talking about how their deep learning algorithm is better than what worlds outside the barrier use, and what worlds outside the barrier use is liquidity modeling. So what is liquidity modeling? Well, it's a study that's usually done by a company's treasury department or someone under the CFO, where analysts take a look at all the finances in the company, their cash flow, liquidity positions, and try to determine a future outlook of where the company will be in like 6 months, a year. This is generally done by people who take a look at the internal workings of a company, all of the financial data, and come up with scenarios and stress tests to see just how organizations will react to different scenarios. And people can make a mistake. These things aren't always accurate. Sometimes people intentionally hide things, try to inflate the value of a company, especially if it's publicly traded. These things happen. What is important here is that, again, this Droid is talking about how their machine learning algorithm, their predictive modeling, is superior to a bunch of humans using a variety of methods to analyze a company's future trajectory. And again, they might be right. Like overall, an AI driving a car is going to be safer than a human being, but that human side of us, we want to be in control of the car. We are much more eager to accept the consequences of a crash if we cause it ourselves, rather than a car crashing into something because some robot has malfunctioned. Also, the thing is, we don't know if these robots are just teaching these kids how to be analysts and engineers in an effort to advance AI research and deep machine learning, which that's not potentially bad, right? But if you take a look at Attin, it's not like becoming machine learning engineers is going to make them a ton of money or be a good kind of career choice for them, because they are isolated from the rest of the galaxy. This is a hermit world where everything is controlled. They also don't allow you to have other jobs outside of being an analyst or an accountant, which is kind of sketchy. And so I can only conclude that there is something wrong going on here. The reason why they're forcing all these kids into very specific fields is because they want to control them for a variety of different reasons. This is also why they don't want any visitors here, and they don't want their people leaving either. And I think the secret has a lot to do with this.
Once you're assigned a career path, you'll become part of our planet At Attin's contribution to the great work, keeping the Republic peaceful and strong.
The way she talks about this is a little strange. It's very cultish. She talks about everyone joining this giant network, and more importantly, she talks about the Great Work. Now, a lot of High Republic fans were excited to hear this because something known as the Great Works was a central part of Chancellor Lena So's term in office. The Great Works were basically a series of projects that were outlined by the Chancellor as crucial to continuing the Republic's growth and success. This included things like infrastructure programs, like the creation of the Starlight Beacon in the Outer Rim, the repair and upgrading of the galactic communication relay system all throughout the galaxy to create stable connections. Another great work was figuring out how to cultivate Bacta and using it to treat illnesses and wounds. There are also political goals in the Great Works, like creating a peace treaty amongst the Corns and Mon Calamari. Another key component to the Great Works was technological innovations in a variety of different fields. And what is the holy grail of technology? Well, that is sentient machines, aka making general AI. Now, you might be saying to me, hey Alan, aren't there already general AI machines in Star Wars, like the droids, R2-D2, or even earlier you had HK-47 during KOTOR. But here's the thing, R2-D2 is basically a second generation astromech in its product line and considered still quite new during the Imperial period. And the Old Republic is now considered Legend, so we don't know exactly how advanced those robots back then were. Legends, Star Wars kind of suffered from the stagnation in technology, which I think was a problem. It is possible that At Attin sealed itself off from the rest of the galaxy before the first sentient droids were created. This is also why this planet would need to hide itself, because the creation of a machine consciousness that functions at a much higher level than your average droid would be seen as a threat by a galaxy that hates droids. The droids that we see on At Attin also seem very lacking in personality and autonomy, unlike the droids we see in other Star Wars stories, especially those who never get their memory wiped. But then again, there's an even more likely theory that I have about all of this. These kids aren't exactly being taught how to become engineers, they're being trained as accountants and analysts. On top of that, they're being heavily controlled, watched, corralled, and also tested. It's very possible that the great work on At Attin is a larger experiment to create the perfect society through the use of the labeling algorithm they were talking about. In a lot of ways, the people on this world remind me of like one of the more experimental Fallout shelters. If you take a look at it, everyone in the society has a role, and they really define themselves through that role. That's basically what everyone talks about. It's all about conformity and metrics, things that would make it easier for a larger computer system to understand very complicated sentient beings. This is your labeling, right? Labeling algorithm. This might be why there's constant testing and evaluation of these people. Even when these children become adults, they still are being tested.
I have a supervisor's review, so I'm not going to be around much.
So what if this supervisor isn't a sentient being? What if it is a higher AI consciousness, and its entire job is to organize society, analyze the data coming out of society, and try to figure out the optimal way to keep these people productive and relatively happy? And at least from outside, At Attin does look like a paradise. We talked about it in our last video. You know, a lot of people might hate the suburbs, might see it as dystopian, but for the majority of the world, living in the suburbs with clean water, with your own house, with your own room, with a lawn is like a dream. You know, a lot of people in this world live in tiny boxes, like I do. A lot of people live in non-permanent shelters. I mean, it's not so easy out there. If you take a look at Star Wars, it's really the only place where people have their own single-family homes and aren't stuck in those little tiny boxes or living in rural areas without infrastructure. The dystopian aspect of the society could be that machines are determining what paradise should look like for humans. As we all know, human beings are quite varied in their goals and wishes. If you're very extreme about creating order and stability in any human society, you are going to be oppressing a percentage of that society. It's just, that's what humans are. We're chaotic. This means that one-size-fits-all solutions usually don't work, and any society that tries to enforce such a social contract usually becomes problematic as a result. It's hard to tell what exactly is wrong with At Attin right now, though, because everything is from the point of view of children, and children oftentimes see the world from a very different perspective, and they might miss certain things that could tell us just what is going on in the society. We hardly see any conversations from adults in the first episode, aside from Whim's dad being overburdened by work and Fern's mom being concerned about her position in class. They both seem very stressed out in their own way, but that hardly is abnormal for adults in any society. It will be interesting to see how these two interact when they try to get their kids back, because they assuredly will have to deal with the robots and bureaucracy on this planet. They'll also probably have to talk to the supervisor because their children breached the barrier, which is a big no-no, right? There has to be some kind of cover-up or consequences over this action. I'm really interested to see if the supervisor is also a human being or just some AI, as I predict. And as both individuals are a part of the system and relatively higher ranking, it will be interesting to see how their conflict against the system will play out, because I'm sure as they get more desperate to find their kids, the more contentious their relationship will be with this so-called supervisor and whatever limitations and control it is trying to force on the populace. As brainwashed and as trained as these humans might be, we are still very emotional creatures, and it's really hard to erase that aspect out of us unless you lobotomize us or, I don't know, pump us full of drugs, especially when those emotions are a parent's feelings for their offspring when they're in danger. Anyway, guys, let me know in the comment section below what you think about my theory. I'm aware there are a lot of other theories about At Attin, like this being a first order world or a pipeline for the banking clans who need a lot of analysts, or maybe it's a separatist holdout. No matter what it is, I think At Attin is a truly unique planet in the larger Star Wars lore. We haven't really seen anything like this before, and I'm all for it. You know, I love new stuff that's not tied to the Skywalker saga. Just kind of getting tired of that. I'm also a Solo guy anyway, so if we are watching the Skywalker saga, I want to see more shenanigans from smugglers and criminals. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Stay tuned to see what else is going on with Skeleton Crew and what's going on with At Attin. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy, I'll see you next time, guys.